evolução. Pensar transforma, muda, é evolução. O conhecimento liberta, vamos transformar. Educar o mundo de dentro pra fora, interpretar. Mundo líquido, monolítico. A solução é alfabetizar, é reinventar. Me dê a mão e vamos para a luta já. Braços abertos, a felicidade encontrar. De braços dados vamos ao outro ajudar. Paulo, pernambucano, franzino, valente, homem de bem, revolucionário, pensador além do seu tempo, destemido como um futuro visionário. Você sim merece uma estátua, meu rapaz. Herói nacional, defensor da cultura e paz. Foi traído, perseguido. Seus ideais foram oprimidos e subjugados. Portanto, o amor ao próximo, Paulo foi exilado. Plantou a semente com amor e dedicação, com métodos da primária à pós-graduação. Paulo, ser humano garrido, professor mentor dos mais oprimidos, alunos com valores, ético crítico, criador da escola do saber sobre o poder. Que o mundo moderno não mate os nossos sonhos, questiona sempre, inclusive os freirianos, dor de ciência, humanismo, dentro e fora da sala de aula o aprender emana, reflexão da complexidade humana. Paulo cristão, a base do pensamento racional. Ensino é um ato político cultural. Paulo Freire é educação. Pensar transforma, muda, é abolição. Freiriana é sua missão. Pensar transforma, muda, é evolução. O conhecimento liberta, vamos transformar. Educar o mundo de dentro pra fora, interpretar. Mundo líquido, monolítico. A solução é alfabetizar, é reinventar. Me dê a mão e vamos para a luta já. Braços abertos, a felicidade encontrar. De braços dados vamos ao outro ajudar. Paulo, pernambucano, franzino, valente, homem de bem, revolucionário, pensador além do seu tempo, estátua, meu rapaz. Herói nacional, defensor da cultura e paz. Foi traído, perseguido. Seus ideais foram oprimidos e subjugados. Portanto, o amor ao próximo, Paulo foi exilado. Plantou a semente com amor e dedicação, com métodos da primária à pós-graduação. Paulo, ser humano garrido, professor mentor dos mais oprimidos, alunos com valores ético-crítico, criador da escola do saber sobre o poder. Que o mundo moderno não mate os nossos sonhos, questiona sempre, inclusive os freirianos, dor de ciência, humanismo, dentro e fora da sala de aula, o aprender emana, reflexão da complexidade humana. Paulo cristão, a base do pensamento racional. Ensino é um ato político-cultural. Paulo Freire é educação, pensar transforma, muda, é abolição. Freiriana é sua missão, pensar transforma, muda, é evolução. O conhecimento liberta, vamos transformar, educar o mundo de dentro pra fora, interpretar. Mundo líquido, monolítico. A solução é alfabetizar, é reinventar. Me dê a mão e vamos para a luta já. Braços abertos, a felicidade encontrar. De braços dados vamos ao outro ajudar. Paulo, pernambucano franzino, valente, homem de bem, revolucionário, pensador, além do seu tempo, destemido como um futuro visionário. Você sim merece uma estátua, meu rapaz. Herói nacional, defensor da cultura e paz. Foi traído, perseguido. Seus ideais foram oprimidos e subjugados. Portanto, o amor ao próximo, Paulo foi exilado. Plantou a semente com amor e dedicação, com métodos da primária à pós-graduação. Paulo, ser humano garrido, dos mais oprimidos, alunos com valores ético-crítico, criador da escola do saber sobre o poder. Que o mundo moderno não mate os nossos sonhos, questiona sempre, inclusive os freirianos de ciência, o humanismo, dentro e fora da sala de aula, o aprender emana reflexão da complexidade humana. Paulo cristão, a base do pensamento racional. Ensino é um ato político-cultural. Paulo Freire é educação, pensar transforma, muda, é abolição. Freiriana é sua missão, pensar transforma, muda, é evolução. O conhecimento liberta, vamos transformar, educar o mundo de dentro pra fora, interpretar. Mundo líquido, monolítico. A solução é alfabetizar, é reinventar. Me dê a mão e vamos para a luta já. Braços abertos, a felicidade encontrar. De braços dados vamos ao outro ajudar. Paulo, pernambucano franzino, valente, homem de bem, revolucionário, pensador além do seu tempo, destemido como um futuro visionário. Você sim merece uma estátua, meu rapaz, herói nacional, defensor da cultura e paz. Foi traído, perseguido, seus ideais foram oprimidos e subjugados. Portanto, o amor ao próximo, Paulo foi exilado. Plantou a semente com amor e dedicação, com métodos da primária à pós-graduação. Paulo, ser humano garrido, professor mentor dos mais oprimidos, alunos com valores ético-crítico, criador da escola do saber sobre o poder. Que o mundo moderno não mate os nossos sonhos, questiona sempre, inclusive os freirianos de ciência, o humanismo, dentro e fora da sala de aula, o aprender emana reflexão da complexidade humana. Paulo cristão, a base do pensamento racional. Ensino é um ato político-cultural. educação. Pensar transforma, muda, é abolição. Freiriana é sua missão. Pensar transforma, muda, é evolução. O conhecimento liberta, vamos transformar. Educar o mundo de dentro pra fora, interpretar. Mundo líquido, monolítico. A solução é alfabetizar, é reinventar. Me dê a mão e vamos para a luta já. Braços abertos, a felicidade encontrar. De braços dados vamos ao outro ajudar. Paulo, pernambucano, franzino, valente, homem de bem, revolucionário, pensador além do seu tempo, destemido como um futuro visionário. Você sim merece uma estátua, meu rapaz, herói nacional, defensor da cultura e paz. Foi traído, perseguido, seus ideais foram oprimidos e subjugados. Por tanto amor ao próximo, Paulo foi exilado. Plantou a semente com amor e dedicação, com métodos da primária à pós-graduação.
Go.
Okay. Hi, everyone. It's welcome back. We are today in the November event for the film screening event for the Year of Education, honoring Paulo Freire Centennial. It's such a pleasure to be here tonight with three special guests who have been involved with the indigenous communities, investigating and documenting the issues that impacting the indigenous groups and the First Nation tribes. So I would like to welcome everyone and tell you about tonight's films. Now we are watching two short films. One is the Salmonista sampler, and the other film is Our Voices, Our Stories. And the three guests that we have today, three discussants that we have today are Sandy Grande, Judy Hoffman, and Dorene Weise. I would like to start, I would like also to introduce myself. My name is Rita Sakai, and I'm here today because I wrote my dissertation about the 1961 Cuba literacy campaign, and I used the Paulo Freire's principles and ideas to understand the experience of people who took part in the campaign. So between students, teachers, and organizers of the campaign, so I interviewed them to understand how that campaign changed their lives. So, and then I would like to introduce Sandy Grande. Sandy Grande is a professor of political science and Native American and Indigenous Studies at the University of Connecticut, with affiliations in American Studies, philosophy, and women, gender, and sexuality studies. She has received a number of awards, but the most recent award is a project on Indigenous elders and aging. She also has wrote a book, her book, Red Pedagogy, Native American Social and Political Thought, was published in 10th anniversary edition, and it will be translated in Portuguese in 2021. Or maybe it has been translated already. I'm not sure. Sandy can update us on that. Now, and she has published numerous articles, book chapters, and she's a founding member of New York Stands for Standing Rock. So, and one of her projects is the Standing Rock syllabus. So, like I mentioned, as we have the discussion, we will share, Cindy and our other discussants will share a little bit more about what the work they do. Now, Judy Hoffman has worked in film and video for over 35 years. She was active in the alternative television movement of the early 70s, experimenting in the use of a small format video equipment. Judy played a major role in the formation of Kwakwaka'wakw films, working on many of their film productions, and was associate producer on Golub, which debuted in the New York Film Festival. She is still an active member of the Katenquin. So Judy's work focused with the Kwakwaka'wakw First Nation, and Judy, I will ask you to help me with that. These tribals, to pronounce the tribe's name. This tribe's name from British Columbia, and she helped producing, then focusing on films and videotapes about reclaiming the native culture. She was also associate producer on the award-winning Box of Treasures, a film tracing their efforts to repatriate cultural artifacts. And for over 10 years, Judy directs a video training program on the Namgis Reserve, so that the Kwakwaka'wakw First Nation could make their own tapes. Now, and Dorene Weise is an enrolled member of the Minnesota Chippewa tribe. She's the founding president of the American Indian Association of Illinois and the current president of Native American Educational Service Incorporation. In 1972, Dorene founded the first American Indian Adult Learning Center in Chicago to teach American Indian people literacy, the GED, American Indian issues, and the native life skills. Her master's from University of Chicago thesis described this program development, and her NIU dissertation research focused on American Indian traditional ways of teaching and learning through elders. So thank you again for being here, all of you. I'm so honored to be with all of you who has such a knowledge of the indigenous peoples in the United States and First Nations tribes in part of the Canada. Now, so the films we are watching today, and so the first one is the Salmonista sampler. The Salmonista sampler, and we will have a discussion afterwards, is meant to represent the process. So here, the Salmonista sampler is meant to highlight the work of students produced during class, so they could reflect on the work they were producing and track their progress. It was not intended for people outside of this group, but it's going to be shown today, and Judy and will help us to understand the historical background of it. Salmonista sampler reinforce the need for them to learn their own language. It's not a video or it's not a film that's a product, but rather a process video produced during a class. And this film, when it was made, well, it was made by one of Judy's students. So it's a 10-minute short film, and so I hope you enjoy watching that.
We want to maintain wild stocks of fish for all of the reasons described there, for the genetic integrity, for their protection against disease, wipeout. Do we want to maintain those wild stocks, or do we want to go the route that the Americans have in general been forced to go, and that is to ocean ranched stocks of fish?
I think the band decided about 10 years ago that something had to be done with our river. We still consider it our river, and it just seemed to us that the department couldn't care less about what was happening over there. We fought and argued with DFO for 6 years to get that salmon enhancement program started over there. You know, and it wasn't easy. And I guess we already consciously made up our mind that we're going to try and rebuild the wild stocks over there. In answer to your question earlier about where we should be going. And with the lack of, I don't know, funding, I guess, we haven't really been able to progress much further than we have over the last 5 years, because half the things that we wanted to do over there we can't do now because of lack of funding.
Alert Bay as a town, Indian White is dead without fish.
Ida Lam. My last name's Lam. You do want to know my Chinese name? Yes. Wei Ki. And my maiden name, my father's side, Poon. In Hong Kong, I use Poon. Everybody call me Miss Poon because I was a teacher. Oh. but it's different from Canada. Everything following the husband. Now I become Ida Lam. Nice. My brother sponsored me to Canada, and I got a friend, Chin Chow. He was here before, and then he said this is a good place for me, and then I just buy this business and stay here for 6 years already. And when I came to Canada, I found my English is not very good, and then I like to do something. First, I think I like to do the things quietly, and just no one bother me. I just doing the work, and then I take the course for bookkeeping because I got that same knowledge. I was in Hong Kong, the bookkeeping, and then I found out most of my classmates are very young and beautiful. I think if I were a boss, I don't take this woman.
So what we do here is witness the beginning of the second house post. I'd just like to say that part of the reason why I ask people to take part in this ceremony is as important to us as artists, so that the day comes when the house is finished, that house doesn't belong to one person or one family. It belongs to everybody in Fort Rupert.
What I'd really like us to take a look at and to zero in on and discuss are the goals.
And respect for our culture, art, dancing, and language.
I think another goal that our dance class has to have too is to know as much as we can about all the dances, because every tribe's different. Hey, they have a different dances.
Yeah.
And then talk.
Pretty well.
Yeah, yeah. To try to learn as much as we can about all the dances that we can possibly put together.
Yeah.
That's where the importance of what these kids are doing, like videotaping, filming our old people and that.
Okay, yes. So the Salmonista sampler that you just watched had no captions, and it was intentionally screened that way. And so we here I would like to ask turn the conversation to Judy. Judy, if you could give us explain a little bit and give some context of what was happening in the movie, that would be wonderful.
Okay, not a problem. This entire project started out, I was working on a film for the Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago when they were like mounting an exhibit about maritime peoples of the Northwest Coast. I worked on a 10-minute kind of introductory film with Chuck Olin, who was very important. After we got done working on that, they liked us for some reason. They had something, more importantly, they had something they wanted to say. And they found that we were okay. And we started a film called Box of Treasures, which is about the creation of the Umista Cultural Center in Alert Bay, which is, and the repatriation of artifacts from the Museum of Man or Civilization, it's changed its name. They were trying to get back artifacts. We call them artifacts. This is really their cultural heritage, because potlatches were outlawed. The way in which they celebrated and practiced their culture was outlawed by the Canadian government, and a potlatch occurred. Their regalia was stolen and put into museums or sold. And they mounted a 20-year effort to get back their possessions. Many of them were put in jail because they were practicing potlatches. It was a long story that would take up way too much time. In any case, what happened was during the making of Box of Treasures, about the creation of the Umista Cultural Center and their political and cultural programs, it made sense to me that they learned video so that they didn't always have to have white filmmakers come in to tell their stories. And I mentioned it to Gloria Kramner Webster, the executive director of the Umista Cultural Center, and the board of directors, and they thought it was a great idea. They immediately went out and bought video equipment, and I started teaching. One of the first classes that I taught was on-the-job training, going around on a seine fishing boat around their territory, documenting where they lived and how they practiced life. And video became an enormous tool because many of the old people that were with us on the same boat could not get off the boat. So we would go and shoot and bring back the footage and screen it on the boat, and they would talk about it and we would record that. So video started becoming more intriguing. A new way of capturing information. And then they decided in '85 to run a formal course, which I was invited to teach. And that was a 12-week intensive course in video production, and not just production, but also in theory and criticism. And editing, it was all on VHS. Editing equipment was finally starting to occur for VHS video. We bought VHS editing equipment at the end of this course. And what I did was I cut together just samples of videos that they made during the course so that they could see them back and understand what they had, the process that they had been through.
Mm.
Okay?
Yeah.
So it was never used externally, but now everything that we've done with the Salmonistas, they're kind of political. So it was a combination of Sandinistas from Nicaragua, who were okay at that time, and salmon, which was their, they were the salmon people. So they called themselves the Salmonista Video Group.
Huh.
And they're now realizing that these videos can be shared with people outside the community. Tons more to say. I'm done.
Yeah.
Someone else.
Well, that's very. Just thank you for sharing how the title came to be, Judy, the Salmonistas. I would like to hear a little bit about the process. We talked. We know that one of the intentions of this film is for students to track their progress as they reflect on their work. I was wondering if Dorene, with your experience in education, you can talk a little bit about this, or how this part of the film relates to your work.
Well, I started off as a filmmaker too. but I wasn't very successful. But I was the very first American Indian filmmaker in Chicago. And so I did get an opportunity to work in film and television and radio in the 1970s. So, and I was filmed in I was trained in 16mm film, but of course that was too costly and too cumbersome to work in at that time. And there was no, there were very few women involved in that at that time. So I always say I went bad. I was recruited into education, but because what I wanted to do with film was to change the image of American Indian people in the United States, because there were no positive images of us ourselves. There was the Westerns from television, and there were mascots, and there were commercial descriptions of us in very derogatory ways. The news was often very negative. So that's why I went into media, and I had an opportunity to work in that for a couple of years and to train people in journalism and photography. And then, as Judy was saying, the equipment at that time, my first video was a half-inch reel-to-reel black and white. Was the first video machine that we had as an organization that we owned, the organization I was with. So at that time, it was a big time of education developing in the United States for American Indian people. And it only came about where we had this beginning era of what was called self-determination, that we were able to develop any programs for ourselves, because up until that time, the 450 years before then, it had been education had been forced on us by the American government. And so you have this time where all of a sudden, it fell on the heels of termination. The government wanted to terminate a lot of tribes and take their land, and then locate all of American Indian people to cities where where it was planned that they would all become acculturated and no longer be American Indians, and then the government would no longer have to uphold the treaties that were signed with us. So all that kind of happened when I was a young person, and it was going on, and we were writing about it. And of course, there were no American Indian people in public media. We didn't have any people employed in major newspapers or major television stations. So all of it was in the community for the most part. So this was kind of the time then when money came into Chicago for education programs. So I was one of the handful of Indian people that had a bachelor's degree. So they recruited me to start an adult education program. Actually, I didn't have my bachelor's yet, and I had no idea what adult education was. And all I knew was that none of my brothers and sisters had ever graduated from high school. I didn't understand historically our relationship to the government in terms of education. I didn't know at that time, both my grandmothers had been in boarding school, had gone to boarding school. I didn't understand that there's a lot of politics involved in how we got there, how we got to a place where most Indian people dropped out of high school, and we're a large segment, we're illiterate. So kind of looking at film was an instrument which I thought could be used for that, but it was so cumbersome. There was no money. There were no other people that were that were, when doing that work with me. I was all by myself. And so it kind of, I went into education to begin, I guess, anew looking at, well, what could I do to help our people from an educational standpoint?
Mm-hmm.
If I could add, I think it's really important that the development of video came up. It was far less expensive, but also there started to be some politics involved with media. We questioned who made media, for what reasons, and for what purposes. And I remember when I worked as an assistant for Jean Rouch, who is a major visual anthropologist. and sat in with them and took notes about meetings at this this conference that I was assigned to work with them at. And it was, the idea came up between him and Margaret Mead and other people about shared anthropology. Okay, about not just taking things out of cultures, but putting things back into cultures. Taking that information that you received and giving it back to cultures so that they could use it. And I think this was an entire politic of the time, whether it was leftist, anti-war, feminist, all of these social upheavals were going on at a particular moment in history. And at the same time, video came into play so that you could actually relate the technology, this revolutionary technology that put video in the hands of the people with the politic of the time. So it was the idea of sharing information.
So you, Judy and Dorene, you spoke a little bit about the critical role of giving the camera, right? Teaching the indigenous people to make films. So to change the perception, right? To inform people. And so the important role of having them tell their stories. Now, so we'll go back to it a little bit, but Sandy, how do you see this sampler relate to your work?
Well, I just want to start with saying, like, I'm very grateful to be invited to the conversation, and also Judy, to learn about some of the interesting context behind the sampler, and Dorene. Those are definitely times when I appreciate so many folks of a particular generation in the discipline to, because it really was lonely out there. So I appreciate all the work that was done to kind of create paths. I'll just say that we're here also to kind of make some linkages between Indigenous education and the celebration of Paulo Freire's 100th birthday. And so much of what this is of what we've seen is relevant in many ways to kind of the kind of work that Freire hoped to do sort of around this time. Certainly enabling and working with communities to tell their own stories and their own voices is a centerpiece of the kind of work that he did. And there's also some differences, I think, that I write about myself in terms of how critical theory does or doesn't, educational theory does or doesn't relate to Indigenous peoples and communities. But I think I'll just say that education, his belief that there is no such thing as a neutral education. And I think whether we're thinking about, the kind of education that Dorene introduced in terms of that was imposed upon many Indigenous peoples and through boarding schools and through the state apparatuses of oppression, to the kind of education that comes from the ground and within communities that centers their own lives and needs and futures. So we see throughout that lots of relevance, I think, to his work.
Thank you, Sandy. And so I think we will have opportunity to talk a little bit more. I would like to hear a little bit more. I would like you to share a little bit more with our audience about your work. And because I would, I think it will, the next film will bring a lot more information about the schooling that took place with the Indigenous and the First Tribe Nations. So Our Voices, Our Stories is a film that, it's a short film that display the experience by indigenous adults today who attended St. Michael's residential school. They were forced to speak English, pray about 7 times a day, cut their fringe, wash their mouth with a cleanser to remain clean. And so in this film, one of the things we'll see is them sharing their feelings of maybe relief, healing, and a hopeful future from the violence, abuse, discrimination, shame that they experienced, that initiated with when they were separated from their parents when they were young. So, and that their culture was stripped away at that time too. So we are going to return to our discussion after watching this second film.
I want to get rid of the Indian problem. Our objective is to continue until there is not a single Indian in Canada that has not been absorbed into the body politic, and there is no Indian question.
Nuguam Gilgilis la Gautnaqua la Jawa de Eno.
Nuguam Aqualas Gaila Guai.
Nuga Wikila Gautla Quagot the Showits.
Nuguam Hostijas Gautla Guai.
Now you say you're sorry. It's not what you say, it's what you do. Tell us you'll do better, but it's hard to believe in you. The day has finally come, told the world that you were wrong. Far too many have passed on now. When it's sorry, took away our children, stole our mother's love, laid waste to our tradition. Was it bad enough? Will it be enough? Yeah, yeah. When it's sorry enough. Hey.
Imagine for a moment your 6-year-old child taken from you, taken to a place far away from the love and security of home, family, and community. In 1879, the Government of Canada implemented the Indian residential school system to eliminate the Indian problem. The goal was to absorb the Aboriginal population into the general Canadian identity by imposing Christian religion, forcing the use of the English language, and abandoning important family traditions. At the same time, taking the rich resources from our lands and rivers, and then taking our children, our Gwala'yu, which in our Kwakwaka'wakw language means our reason for living. This caused great devastation on our people for generations. In 1929, St. Michael's Indian Residential School opened its doors in Alert Bay. It was the largest school operated by the Anglican Church. First Nations children from the northwest coast of British Columbia were taken from their homes. The Nisga'a from the Nass River, Haida from Haida Gwaii, Heiltsach from Bella Bella, Ha'esala from Kitimat, Newhulk from Bella Coola, Awikinu from Rivers Inlet, and many other children from the Kwakwaka'wakw, including Smith Inlet, Village Island, Kinkham Inlet, Guilford Island, Wakeman Sound, and Hopetown. We continue to strive for healing and forgiveness. The resilience of our people survived a very dark and devastating period. In this day in history, we come together and send a powerful message of strength, healing, and hope for the future. This will never happen again in our history as a people.
To me, it is a Holocaust, start of a Holocaust in our life, reached home. You hear about the Holocaust in wars and all that, but it reached us. And I just don't want to see my kids like that.
I've thought so often about my experience here. There's really no redeeming grace about residential schools. I hear some of our people say, you know, we shouldn't even talk about it anymore, leave it in the past. But those years were so traumatic, and they had such a lifelong negative impact on my life and my family's life and others, that some of us are still recovering from that experience. And so I can't find any redeeming grace about St. Michael's Indian Residential School. Even if I had a good experience, they shouldn't take little children away from their homes and families and the cultures they grew up in and the languages they spoke to. And so even from that perspective, it's not a good, never ever was a good experience. I wasn't physically or sexually abused, but I was emotionally and spiritually abused, because out of the safe haven of my parents' home, I was removed and put in this school where the people here who looked after us had no idea what First Nations people were about. I guess the spiritual part was taking away our culture. We were not allowed to speak our language. We were not allowed to communicate or even talk about where we came from, because they made us talk English. And that was hard, because a lot of us didn't know how to speak English.
When I first arrived to the school here, I had long braids. They were down to my waist, and my granny had fixed it nicely before I came. And when I arrived here, part of the cleansing of of us, because we were believed to have head lice and that we were dirty, and it couldn't have been further from the truth, because my grandmother really nurtured and cared for us really well. And so when we arrived, they just cut our braids off, never combed it out, combed your hair forward and just cut straight across.
I walked up here with Herbie Smith and Art Lagus, the three of us. I was 5 years old, and I think them guys were probably a few months older than me. When we first walked through the door, I was in awe of the building. I've never seen any buildings that big or been inside any buildings that big. And a staff member was coming by, and I got slapped in the head. And I was crying, and I said to Herbie, I said, I wonder why he did that. And he slapped me again. He said, I want you talking that language here. And I didn't understand that because nobody ever told me that the rules that they had. So it ended up that from there, it just seemed to have gotten worse there, that when you were looking at a staff member, it was like, don't you look at me like that, and whap. And then so you'd hang your head. And then the end result of that was, you look at me when I'm talking to you.
We prayed, I think, probably 6 or 8 times a day. And the last one was before you went to bed. When you arrive in the school, you're issued a number. I was number 5 as a junior girl. And then later on, when I got to be an intermediate girl, I might have been 10 or 11, then I was issued number 55. You never heard your name. Even chores that were changed monthly, you just look up your number, and that's what you did for the month.
Well, the loneliness was unbearable. The loneliness was unbearable. And I don't think I'm the only one that has that in their story. The loneliness just got so unbearable that the way I coped was I withdrew from everybody. That was my coping. And it never left me until February.
We didn't have toothpaste. We had tooth powder. Wouldn't you know it, we ran out of tooth powder. They won't know. Use Dutch cleanser on holy Moses. We gagged, and we still had to brush our teeth with that Dutch cleanser.
I couldn't see my brother that much, and which was really frightening for me because he's the baby. And I'm very protective. And even with the other students, I looked after them. I take the role on as a protector. I still do that to this day. So I'm always that person to help.
They got oats in bulk. It would get damp, and it's automatic that you're going to have maggots in it. So because you didn't have very much to eat, what you did was you just ate. When you see one flick, ate, flick, and every now and then you would eat one, and it didn't taste very good, but you kept eating anyway.
I never ever told anybody what I used to think of Alert Bay until I went there. I used to think, you know, if I ever go back to that hellhole, you know, I'm gonna give them back what they gave me. But when I went there, I found out that it wasn't the people of Alert Bay that I hated and that I despised. It was the residential school. My experience was not good. It was not a good experience. I got no education. I guess the abuse, sexual, and it was more sexual for me than physical, verbal, the abuse.
I wanted to get out of the residential school system. And I heard this one kid that he was going to make an escape. Please take me with you, please. He says, no. Bedtime. It was dark. This was probably in the month of November. It rained. Everybody gave what they could again. Their wet jacket, gumboots, food. They made their way to the fire escape. Those days, we had no fire alarms. All we can do is just watch as they proceeded. It started to rain. It started to blow that night. The next day, we all seemed to pray, hoping that they made it. As it turned out, they stole a skiff from down the Fisherman's Wharf. Yes, the wind, storms took their toll. They never made that trip to McNeil. That's how bad it was back in those days. That happened 55 years ago. This is what I can remember of them, of that night. This has always been in my nightmares.
We did those days expecting our dad to come home and pick us up for the summer or Christmas, just staring up on the third floor, take us out for a little while, and awful feeling. And didn't show up. You just sort of sad about it, or sad.
The things that I've learned, the things that I've really learned how to be almost, it's almost in a racist state, you know? That I hated what happened, you know? Physical, sexual abuse, and emotional abuse, you know? I just felt trapped there. You know, I try to deal with a lot of that stuff, but it still comes back. And it's almost like you have to be really immersed in constant treatment to get over a lot of that stuff.
Growing up, we really didn't know anything about what had happened to our parents, in particular my dad. But as time went on, you know, in our teens, we started learning a little bit of this and hearing a little bit about that. And then I guess in my early 20s, my dad started to share a little bit about his experiences and when he was strong enough to let me know, and when I was asking him questions about certain things that I was trying to find out. I think as parents, it's hard for us to fathom what happened to my dad and all of the people that went to residential school. Just to think that, my son, who's 9 now, would have been in there for at least the last 3 years. And as a parent, I couldn't imagine what that must have been like for the parents of the day. And the children that had to, imagine having my son go there without any contact with me or his mom or his family would be just hard to imagine.
We went in to clear the rooms, set the precedence that it's safe to cross over into the light, because their loved ones are on the other side already, and they don't need to stay in that building. So it was, some areas was really intense. There was resistance, but it got easier as we got towards the end of the clearing.
Went in there with the intent of burning spruce needles to help just kind of vacate the building of spirits. I just wanted to just be there in terms of spirit and just being directed by our ancestors to do that work, and bring back those kind of more intense spiritual traditions that often get forgotten. We're really good at holding down the fort in terms of language and in terms of the dance and song, but those actual core spiritual values that give those dances weight and those songs weight, that's kind of where I've always come from.
It was really important for us to help the children transfer over. We went in because we're both mothers, to support not only the children that have passed away, but the ones that are living, and our children. It's all about our children.
Jasmine, I saw a boy. He was coming out of the building when they were throwing rocks at it, and he just floated away. I think they were just trying to go away, trying to run away from it. They were happy to be leaving, and they didn't have a good time in the school.
What else could I say, my relatives? Other than to express my gratitude for the kind of people you are. I ask you to have strong hearts, so that we can go on. So that we can go on taking care of ourselves and each other. The Coast Salish have a really beautiful saying. They say, we have to hold each other up. We have to hold each other up. That's such a simple message. And I want you to know that there are many emotions here today, some really deep sadness, some joy, some tears, some confusion, but we're gathered here because we decided that we would stand together and that we would find the strength and a way to move forward from here. That is all I have to say for now, brothers and sisters.
I was a little scared because I didn't know what I was going to feel. But I felt a lot of relief and forgiveness, seeing all the people, all the children, because there was our inner child.
This is probably the time when I wanted to cry. It was so uplifting. It's just weight, dead weight that I've been carrying around all those years of shame. And that's probably what the day I was experiencing.
I think for myself, it sort of brought a numbness to me where I actually didn't have any feelings until somebody started crying. I could feel it welling up in me. So I walked home. I didn't ride home, I walked home.
Almost like I could feel everybody's pain, you know. But even that distance away, I was still feeling like, you know, I wish I was there for everybody, but I wanted to be alone.
It was a real reawakening, and to be a part of it. I only can recall being a part of a residential school healing once before. It's inspiring to have that, you know, rising up together. And the words that were spoken, all of them were so powerful, and it was positive and gave me a lot of hope that, you know, we can choose to go another way, and that, you know, not to hold back in terms of your self-esteem, your confidence.
My wish is that all our people who have gone through this will heal. Our people will heal better if they're understood. But if you keep condemning them, what they went through, then it'll never get better. But if you work with us, they understand us, then the work would be more beneficial, more positive outcomes, you know.
It was absolutely a moment of triumph. When that machinery knocked that piece out of that archway, I said, I won. In my mind, I said, I won. I'm still here. I'm still striving to make things better. And it was sort of bittersweet, because at the same time, I remembered all of the cruel things that happened there, the hatred, the discrimination, all of that at the same time as recognizing that we're now at this moment where we can say, my gosh, we did survive that. And more exciting, as the day unfolded, I began to recognize that the hope we were simply talking about before is going to be real, that we can actualize the idea that hope lives and reigns, and people have the power to move forward beyond being victims. Yeah.
The way I try to encourage my children to, but also to stay with people who are cultural, learn from people who are cultural. I'm a believer that, like myself, who has struggles with the culture, it's probably not a bad idea to pass my position down to one of my boys who are excelling in the culture. So it's not a bad thing. I do not have to be a chief. I can still be a silent warrior somewhere, you know. But that's the way I see it. I'm always in the crowd, but never in the front. I'm there. I just want to belong to the Kwakwaka'wakw. Yeah, that's all.
Soccer, sports, and culture really helped me when I was growing up, and still does, to keep me on a somewhat clean path. And without culture, soccer and sports, other sports, I don't know what kind of life I might have had or would have been living. So it's important that we show our kids a healthy lifestyle. Nobody's perfect, but we're trying. And this is what I can do as a parent to help my son out, is to support his little soccer career.
It is time to move on. It is time to keep our lights lit. And we're burning these candles and holding them up, and don't let them out, because from here on, we move on. We move on with our future because we need to. So light your candles and hold them up. That's why we're having the candles, because it is one of the 4 elements, the fire, that keeps us going.
I think about this open space now, and I think it's not there any longer. The shadow has been removed from our lives, and we don't want it to ever define us again. So it represents for me a new moment in which we can redefine our lives and our future for ourselves individually, our families, and communities. So that's what that open space represents now, hey?
On behalf of the Namgis, I welcome you all here today for this very special ceremony. We're here to accept this land as it was before they built the St. Michael's Residential School here. Accept it as it was. We will not forget why that building was put on this land. It was meant to kill our language, kill our culture, in the end, trying to kill us as Kwakwaka'wakw. Not only Kwakwaka'wakw, we had students right up to the Nishka, Haida, Bella Bella, Bella Kula, all over the coast that came here to this school. So we will not forget what was here. It's our intention to ask for a blessing of this land. Umatakila, umatakila, yasna wala, yasna wala, gil du kwila, gil du kwila. Yasna wala, yasna wala. Oy, 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 oy. Alabas lawe, alawe. Dakala komeso ikila suins gacha. Gacha eidaka. Awina guisa sa namgisa. Akila kasha. Akila kasha.
I have to accept the fact that the Creator has given me a gift. By being able to learn all of the songs that I've acquired through different circumstances, mostly through tribal journeys. As I reflect upon who I am, where I came from, and the atrocities and the dilemmas that I faced through my early years by being a part of the residential school system. We are now at a special time whereby we can look at the past and begin our healing. Leave all of the pain behind us so that we move forward in a positive way. And that somehow through spiritual justice, we shall end our lives in a way that is meaningful for not only ourselves, but for our people. that if there are people out there that don't fully understand what we've gone through, one day, through the grace of our Creator, you'll understand. And the healing begins now. To all of my brothers and sisters out there that are still practicing drugs, alcohol, because they can't get out of that hole that was dug for them, my prayers to you. And I know that as we reflect on my own family, I have brothers and family members who have never been able to find resolve for what was the result of residential school. I dedicate the song to you. The song that has become survivors' lament, or the survivors' hope for the future. That now we can look proudly at our children and know that they'll never be taken away from us again. That's the pride that we have as First Nations people, that we are able to, despite being in the same hole, a lot of us are able to look forward to a better way, to a better life. That is my hope. So through the residential school song, I dedicate it to all of the survivors and all of the generations that have been impacted by the residential school. And there are many. So to all of you, my prayers that we have a good future ahead of us.
Trying to kill our spirit here, but our hearts still beat as one. You took away our children, stole our mother's love, laid waste to our tradition. Wasn't that I wasn't born to be here. The city's not my home. It's not my native land. Now the streets are so familiar. Oh, this is not what our mothers took away our children, stole our mother's love, laid waste to our traditions.
So our voices and our stories was really a very touching movie or a short film. And so I think I will just we'll just go around and talk, share our impressions about the boarding school, the residential school, education of the indigenous peoples and First Nation peoples. So we just go around and start sharing, if it's okay with you. Would you like to start, Judy?
Yeah, I'll start because I know about this. The filmmaker Barbara Cranmer was a member of the Salmonista video crew for years, and would come to Chicago to work with me. I'd mentor her. So she was the one consistent person from the Salmonista video crew who wanted to continue with making films. And she made them. This is, in fact, her last film. She passed away several years ago from a brain tumor. We were close. We were deeply close. She adopted me in a formal potlatch. That's why in my name it says Gwixisilas. That's my Indian name. We worked together beyond what you saw with the Salmonistas. They videotaped artifacts in the Field Museum and got the field notes and read them as they were videotaping them, took them back home to show to their old people, which we call elders now. Back then, old people was okay to call them, to see if they knew anything about the regalia. In any case, she continued to work in film. I worked with her on several films about the rebuilding of the big house in Alert Bay. Things that you need to like have some understanding of the culture, the importance of ulukan grease, okay, weaving. Her films were screened and won awards at what is it called? Oh, the American Indian Film Festival at Sundance. She became quite a prolific and recognized Indigenous filmmaker. And this is her last film, Our Voices Are Stories. She wanted to make a film about the residential schools. Residential schools started in Canada around 1880 and continued through till 1980, where children were stolen from their reserves and brought to locations to work cheaply, like in fish canneries, and also to take away the children. When you take away the children from a community, and these are communities that like span a huge territory, you destroy these communities.
Right.
You take the children away, there's nothing left. So the idea of residential schools was horrifying, which you just saw. And they're finally starting to investigate them so that there's from 1880 to 1980. What can I say? I'm deeply emotional about this because I know too many people in this film that finally, for the first time, had finally said something. But they were tortured, and they're now finding out that there's over 7,500 graves located in these residential school sites, graves of children.
Judy, and I would like to interrupt here a little bit. And I was really, it was really powerful to hear some of the interviewees, some of the folks talking about how they were really suffered. They were abused, right? They were somehow abused, and some even died. So it's really, it sends a powerful message of what happened at that time within the residential schools, boarding schools. And so I would like to move on a little bit with ask Dorene, because it's also because of to give opportunity for all of us to share our perceptions and opinions. But Dorene, and I think, can you tell also a little bit about Chicago, about today, and how the indigenous children or the new generation are doing?
You're muted, Dorene.
I'm sorry. First, I wanted to talk a little bit about land acknowledgements and how they're a really good thing, because they have brought people to look at the history of the area where they are. And in Chicago, we're on the land of the Council of the Three Fires, the Ojibwe or Chippewa, as we're known, and the Odawa and Potawatomi. But there have also been hundreds of other tribes that have lived here, but they were smaller. And then also right now today, we have a very large American Indian population in Chicago, brought here, placed here through a relocation program, which when the government was trying to terminate the tribes, and he wanted to send all the people into the cities so that the tribes could be terminated and the treaties could be abolished. So we have a lot that has gone on in the last 150 years here in Chicago, and it has brought us to this point. Now, and not only in Chicago, but across the country, most American Indian people live in urban areas. They live in big cities. We don't live all on reservations and ride horses and have teepees and war bonnets. And those are the mascots are an issue for us because people do not know the real history of American Indian people and how we got to this place in time. But just know that most people live in cities today, and yet most funding goes to reservations. Only 1% goes to urban areas. So with that said, I feel it's a good thing, land acknowledgements, because it gives us an opportunity to talk, and it gives people an understanding of what people were here, and also it introduces them to treaties. They have to look at the treaties. Also, I wanted to talk a little bit about Mace College, which was the only urban American Indian college in the country. You might say again, why is that important? Well, because most Indian people are being placed in urban areas. We only had the opportunity to go to non-native schools. Again, this is a perpetuation of knowledge of people who were our oppressors. There was no place for Indian people to learn about themselves, to learn about our own history. Growing up, I didn't have any books in my home. I didn't have any books. I knew nothing about American Indian history. I end my dissertation talking about how I am a representative of 5 different tribes. I did not know one American Indian word when I was 40 years old. So that's total cultural genocide. I didn't know one American Indian song. I didn't know one American Indian dance. I didn't know one American Indian story. That is total cultural genocide and that's because my grandparents were in residential schools, as Judy talked about, where people, they were discouraged from talking whatever and singing their language, but also there were laws. Most people don't know this. The American Indian Religious Freedom Act was not passed totally until 1993. The Native American Church was not allowed to legally to exercise their rights until that time. And that was not that long ago. So I think that Mace College, the idea was that Mace would build a bridge between the urban areas where most of the people were and their tribal communities, so that exchange of knowledge could continue, where people could learn how to run organizations, where they could learn how to run businesses, and then they could learn about media, and then they could bring that back to their tribal communities and grow that there. So NACE did a really good job at that for 40 years, and then they lost their accreditation. But accreditation had always been a struggle. Because again, the foundation of accreditation is Western from the Western education system. We were being compared to people like the University of Chicago that has millions and millions of dollars. We had a budget of less than $1 million a year to run 5 campuses around the United States. So you can see how that analysis, that comparison just would not work. And so that was a big problem. So we had some time to develop our own materials and curriculum and history, but it was so tiny in the scope of time. So that's something that we still need. We need to develop our own education systems, and we need to develop our own materials and writing, and that is slowly happening, but it is happening. The other thing I wanted to talk about was that in my research, what I came to after building education programs here in Chicago was that we needed to, and this really comes out of my media work, is that we need to use oral history, that we need to go to elders to learn from, because we did not have a written society. It makes sense. It's very simple. We had to learn from our elders because they held the knowledge. They held the knowledge of our language, our music, our dance, our history, and everything about our people. So that was how that kind of fell into my research about in terms of elders. But my point in terms of how it's different than other people was that I realized that it's an exchange. That learning is an exchange. What our tuition is the time we spend with those elders. And so we do things for them and they teach us. It's a service, I guess you'd call it a service learning model. And that's the way it works. Should truly work. So,
if I may jump in here, Dorene, the Kwakwaka'wakw, the First Nation group that I worked with, it was they had no written orthography. They had no orthography. It was, if anything was written, it was about it was a translation of the Bible into their language.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so that there was that kind of cultural oppression that went on, and it took until the Umisa Cultural Center and hiring a linguist to start to translate outside of biblical translations and Boaz translations to some language that was written and understandable. Otherwise, their entire culture was based on oral tradition.
Yeah. Thank you for adding that part, Judy. And Sandy, I would like to move to you because I know we have still few minutes, but I would like to hear if you could share with us your thoughts.
Yeah, I think we're at time, and that's fine. I enjoyed listening to the other speakers, and I'll just add really quickly. I mean, I think many of our cultures were, and peoples and communities were indeed on the oral tradition, but you know, the ways in which the resilience and the relentlessness in which people have protected that knowledge, I think speaks to the strength of oral traditions. And I think there's a way over valorization of like the written word and what that means, and create a hierarchy around that. But I mean, the whole point of the schools was, I mean, there's sort of the infamous quote from General Richard Pratt in the US where he talked about killing the Indian and saving the man as a campaign. And I don't know that that campaign doesn't seem that it's over in terms of the state sanctioned violence that is ongoing. So I think the other thing I would like to underscore for people to understand is we're not talking 100 years ago. You can see the people in the film are, you know, the ages of lots of folks' parents and grandparents. And so it's only 30 years ago. And even right now, whether we're talking about pipelines being put through Standing Rock or the Wet'suwet'en Nation, who just a couple of days ago, there was a violence enacted upon them continuously. I mean, but the latest was a couple of days ago by the RCMP up in Canada, again, over pipeline. So I think that the motivation from the state is still there to erase Indians, to commit genocide of multiple kinds. Erasure happens in lots of different ways, preventing people from knowing their own, trying to prevent people from knowing their own histories. They were not successful. And certainly what's happening in public schools, certainly across the US right now, with trying to ban knowledge, a critical understanding of history is another form of erasure that we're all fighting against, that, you know, hits, the impact is differential on different communities, but it impacts everybody, it impacts all of us. And I think people need to ask themselves the question, what is the threat? What is the threat that these supposedly, you know, small bands of indigenous communities pose to the great nations? If indeed they're so strong that they come down and they put, you know, continue to kill and maim and debilitate communities. I think people have to ask the question is, why would they still be so intent upon that erasure? Because that's a question that's about all of our futures. I think I'll just leave it there. You're muted, Rita.
Well, I can say something a little bit to address your really deep question. Is that it's a political. It's about racism. It's about our economic system of capitalism. It's about so many unfortunate things. And it's not to, you know, in some way, like, you know, make like First Nation people just this lovely group of people that understands and has a special relationship to the, you know, to the material world. But I think it's about our ignorance.
Yeah. And yes, I think it's partially what you're saying is the not knowing. And I myself, I learned so much about the struggles from the indigenous groups and the people. And because we are about to and we are going to be ending this session, but I would like, if you are willing to, we could continue talking a little bit. But I just want to give a closing to our event tonight, which we were not even nearly able to discuss in depth so many things that you shared with us. But as someone who read a little bit about Freire, I think one of the things that touched me the most is the fact that in the Sandinista sampler, that was the beginning of relearning and bringing the culture back for so many of the people that were not familiar with their culture, because that was eradicated. So I think knowing where you come from, and this is, I guess, more of bringing your humanity back as a person, right? As a not only a person, but a group of people. So I think, with that, I would like to end in that note tonight. And I want to thank you all again for your contribution. And perhaps we can continue talking a little bit about today too, how young people are becoming empowered with the work that the elders did in the past. So, for example, St. Michael's, the fact that the school was demolished, or the old traumatic experience were put back in the past, and I think they are the younger generation were able to then do something newer. They learn from their past, and they, after such a reflection, they decided to take another route that would not repeat the history, but yet empower themselves more. And that goes to all levels. I see that in the classroom level, like during the lessons, right? During that Sandinista, not Sandinista, the Salmonista sampler, everybody were together, right? They were reconstructing their history together. And there's a lot of healing taking place there. So they were doing as a community. And I think there is a lot of power when people together, they are able to create something new. So it's a lot more powerful when they do as a community, as opposed to alone. Of course, everybody is going through that process.
I would add, Rita,
yeah.
it's about agency.
Yes,
it's
also,
not
yes.
just about,
yeah.
It was a democratic process where they decided what they wanted to speak to and how they wanted to speak to it.
Yeah.
And how it could be imagined. So it's about having like this equipment that's very easy to learn equipment to allow agency.
Yeah.
So people use it.
Right. Judy, let's, so we are going to close the programming, but I would like to keep us still, we will stay in the room for a while. So thank you so much, everyone. And so this program is for the month of November. And we are going to have another programming coming up. So please, we are going to have another program in November and 2 in December. So please check the Hot House website, Hot House Global. And so I thank you all for being here today, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
educação. Pensar transforma, muda, é abolição. Freiriana é sua missão. Pensar transforma, muda, é evolução. O conhecimento liberta, vamos transformar. Educar o mundo de dentro pra fora, interpretar. Mundo líquido, monolítico. A solução é alfabetizar, é reinventar. Me dê a mão e vamos para a luta já. Braços abertos, a felicidade encontrar. De braços dados vamos ao outro ajudar. Paulo